It's not a whisper. It's not a rumor. It's happening now. Not next year. Not someday. This year, 2025. 44 countries are lining up to join BRICS, and the momentum feels less like a trend and more like a tidal wave. This isn't diplomatic chatter. This isn't idle speculation. 23 nations have filed formal applications. Another 21 have made their intentions crystal clear. The latest to step into the spotlight? Vietnam. And their message wasn't cloaked in caution. It was loud, direct, and unmistakable. We're ready. We want in. With that, the count hit 44. 44 countries making a deliberate move, not just toward BRICS, but away from the West. Away from Western-led institutions. Away from the dollar's grip. Away from a world order where the rules are written by a few, and the rest are expected to obey. But why now? What triggered this sudden, sharp pivot? To understand the gravity of what's unfolding, rewind to the second week of April 2025. A brief statement from Vietnam's foreign ministry hit the wires. In just a few words, it sent shockwaves through certain parts of the world, and was conveniently overlooked by others. Vietnam's declaration was more than symbolic. It was a signal. BRICS is no longer just expanding. It's becoming a pole of global power. This isn't a slow evolution. It's an avalanche. One declaration after another. Countries stepping out of the shadows, aligning themselves with a bloc that feels less like an alternative, and more like a revolution. By the numbers, 23 formal applications. 21 nations expressing strong interest. 44 countries poised to switch tracks. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. July 7-8, 2025. Rio de Janeiro. The 17th BRICS Summit. Normally ceremonial, but not this time. This one could change everything. Insiders are calling it the most consequential meeting in the alliance's history. On the table, a sweeping expansion. Structural transformation. A unified voice in global economics. And here's the twist. BRICS isn't what it used to be. What began as 5, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is now 10. The fold now includes Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. That's the world's most sanctioned country and the world's most oil-rich nation, sitting at the same table, negotiating trade without the dollar. But it's not just who's joining, it's how they're joining. This is no casual alignment. It's strategic, coordinated. Regional clusters are emerging. West African nations applying as a bloc. Southeast Asian players moving in Vietnam's wake. Even Latin American governments, long seen as tethered to Washington, are quietly opening the back door. And here's the kicker. BRICS isn't even asking. Unlike NATO, there are no open invitations. No recruitment drives. These 44 nations are showing up. Some for the second, even third time, knocking on the door. Not begging. Demanding a seat. What they see in BRICS is simple. Something the West no longer offers. Vietnam's statement spelled it out. A desire for multilateralism, economic independence, and the dignity of being seen as a trusted partner. Diplomatic language, yes, but make no mistake, it was a rebuke. A rejection of imbalance. A challenge to a world where a handful dictate and the rest endure. This wave of expansion isn't just about numbers. It's about identity. These countries aren't just joining a bloc. They're migrating toward a new system. One that speaks their language, reflects their realities, and offers something the West hasn't in decades. Respect. As the July summit approaches, the stakes are undeniable. The clock is ticking. The decisions made in Rio won't just reshape BRICS. They could redraw the global economic map. Because at some point, a movement stops being a reaction and starts becoming a force. And still, the question lingers in the air like thunder before the storm. Why now? Why is 2025 the tipping point? To answer that, we need to cut through the smooth surface of diplomacy and look at the power play unfolding beneath. This isn't just an organic groundswell. This is orchestrated. 3 nations are steering this ship with cold precision: China, Russia, and Iran. They aren't waiting for the world to catch up. They're building it, piece by piece. Behind the scenes, they're driving the narrative, shaping the terms, and turning BRICS from a symbol into a weapon. A geopolitical instrument. The old world order is wobbling. And for the first time in a generation, a new one isn't just possible. It's inevitable. Let's begin where the fault lines are shifting, in China. While many still label Beijing's BRICS diplomacy as cautious, even measured, the truth cuts deeper. Behind the scenes, China has been meticulously architecting this moment for years. Its state-backed banks are no longer experimenting. They're executing cross-border payment systems that sidestep SWIFT entirely. It has quietly inked more than a dozen bilateral trade deals with would-be BRICS members across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia. Not in dollars, but in local currencies. On the surface, it looks like trade. In reality, it's pre-accession integration. Countries economically tethered to Beijing before they've even worn the BRICS badge. And then there's Russia. Economically strangled, Diplomatically unyielding. Since the invasion of Ukraine triggered a tidal wave of Western sanctions, Moscow hasn't just pivoted, it's plunged headfirst into the embrace of the East and South. Where Europe slammed doors, BRICS cracked them open. Russia's role in the bloc's expansion isn't about ambition, it's about survival. BRICS is Moscow's escape hatch, a lifeline to energy markets, new trade corridors, and, most importantly, a rising coalition of nations willing to flout Western sanctions. Pipeline deals with India, ruble-based trade with Iran. These aren't exceptions. They're blueprints. Russia is helping build a parallel world, and BRICS is the shield. Now enter Iran, the wild card, once isolated, now ascendant. For decades, it lived under embargoes and threats, and in that darkness, it forged an unmatched skill. Quiet diplomacy, influence without applause. Since officially joining BRICS in 2024, Tehran has become its backstage strategist, drawing in Venezuela, Syria, Sudan, selling BRICS not as a club, but as a sanctuary. A place where regime change loses its sting, where the dollar has no chokehold. And now the question hangs heavy in the air. What happens if BRICS doesn't stop at 10 or 12 members, but balloons to 44? This isn't some diplomatic game of musical chairs, with nations politely vying for a seat. This is a full-blown attempt to rewrite the code of the global operating system. Let's talk about what's truly at stake. Right now, over 85% of global trade moves through the veins of one currency, the US dollar. Not because nations love it, but because they have no real choice. Whether it's oil, semiconductors, or grain, the dollar is the toll you pay, a toll controlled by Washington. But what if 30 or more nations within BRICS agree to change that rule? Imagine a new financial core, not theoretical, but already in motion. In 2025, 2 BRICS nations quietly executed an oil trade. No SWIFT, no dollars. Just a third-party clearinghouse and the Chinese yuan. The West barely blinked. But the rest of the world? They watched. Closely. That single transaction whispered something dangerous. It can be done. The dollar is no longer invincible. Now scale that. 30 BRICS nations. Hundreds of billions in trade rerouted through local currencies or a shared digital unit. Every deal weakens the dollar's grip. Not overnight, but undeniably. And with each crack in the financial armor, something more crumbles. U.S. sanctions power, its ability to freeze assets, isolate regimes, and pull economic levers at will. That influence begins to decay, slowly, quietly, but with certainty. But it goes deeper than money. Infrastructure. Development. For decades, developing nations had 2 choices, the IMF or the World Bank. Loans with strings. Austerity. Political reforms that often helped outsiders more than locals. Now, imagine a BRICS-backed alternative, the New Development Bank. Supercharged by new members and larger coffers. Loans in local currencies. Funding for real projects. Power grids, dams, roads. Without the reformist fine print. If that begins, the very architecture of development finance tilts. And while BRICS may never be a military alliance on paper, economic interdependence often breeds strategic alignment. Nations that trade outside the Western sphere may begin sharing intelligence, standardizing digital infrastructure, and coordinating security measures. Not with boots on the ground, but with firewalls, surveillance tech, and encrypted communication. Soft power, hardened by cooperation. And there's something else, something visceral. For many leaders in the global south, BRICS isn't just policy, it's personal. In the UN, their voices are symbolic. In the IMF, their presence is a statistic. But in BRICS, they dare to hope, not to follow, but to lead. To help write the rules, not just live by them. But the West is watching. And when pressure builds, retaliation often follows. Sanctions, trade wars, media narratives. So the final question isn't whether BRICS will grow. It's whether it can endure. Whether this new coalition is resilient enough to defy gravity, or destined to collapse under the weight of its ambition. We won't have to wait long. In just weeks, the world turns to Rio de Janeiro. 10 powerful nations. 1 summit. 44 contenders waiting. A decision that could tilt the global balance, permanently. Has BRICS already changed the world? Or is this just the beginning? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you're ready for more stories no one else dares to tell, about power, politics, and the future unfolding in real time, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss what's coming next.